Good afternoon guys, how are you all doing? Welcome back to my channel. I hope you are surviving Storm Dara. Gosh, it's very windy out there at the moment, isn't it? It's currently Saturday night and I actually think it's windier tonight than it was last night. It's just wild out there, which is also why I'm wearing this very unfetching headband, because if I take it off, my hair in this wind has just gone like that. So this is a better option. And you also might see ears or a little bit of white pop up along the bottom here. The dog is asleep there. Well, she is asleep and then she pops up every now and then and has a look. So you might see her in a second. And we have started with some Christmas decks. It's early days. I've literally just done a tiny bit, but it is getting closer, isn't it? It's getting closer. So let's get into today's video. I am talking about side saddle riding and a little bit about the history about it and just some interesting information on it. I do think side saddle is such an elegant way of riding. Like, it's beautiful when you see ladies riding side saddle, whether it's in a showing class or on the hunt field. Like, it's such a skill. Now, I've only ever tried it once out hacking, and honestly, the core strength those women must have, I mean, they must have abs of steel, because it is not easy. I mean, it's fine in walk, but when you have to trot, like, you've got to be strong. And if you've ridden astride all your life, to suddenly sit in a very different way. I know your shoulders are still facing forward, but still, you know, you're twisting a bit and your legs are all on one side. It feels so weird. Like, I really found it was sort of made my balance go a little bit out, but it's something I would love to try again. And I think, oh, I should have done it when I was a bit younger, because I think my older horse now would have probably managed very well side saddle. He's pretty level-headed. So I thought, oh, I should have done it with him. Though those saddles are super expensive, really expensive. But anyway, let's talk a bit more about the history of side saddle. So side saddle riding can be traced back to the 14th century, but it's quite possible it goes back even further than that. It's just we have kind of evidence of it being in the 14th century. And the reason ladies rode side saddle was to protect their modesty. In 1382, tradition has it that Princess Anne of Bohemia rode side saddle across Europe on her way to marrying King Richard II. Now, of course, she rode side saddle because it would have been indecent of her to have ridden astride. Also, they believed there was a risk to a woman being able to carry a child if they rode astride, also that it would affect their virginity. Another reason for them riding side saddle was also because of their clothing. They had such big skirts back then, so it would have been nearly impossible to have ridden astride. So it made more sense for them to sit side saddle, and that way they had the space to sort of let their skirts hang down. So early side saddles were very much like a chair, just facing sideways. So the ladies would literally sit like they're sitting in a chair. They even have like a little footrest for their feet. But what it did mean is it was incredibly hard for them to ride, because if they are actually facing sideways, then actually riding isn't very easy. And also, they weren't that secure in the saddle. So if the horse suddenly did a spook or tripped over, it was very easy for them to fall out. So what would often happen is a man would ride astride on another horse and they would lead the lady on her horse. In the 16th century, side saddles are developed a little bit more so that women can actually ride on their own. They don't have to be led, and they're that bit more secure. A more functional side saddle was said to be developed by Catherine de Medici in the 16th century. Rather than ladies having both feet next to each other on the footrest, she placed her right leg over the pommel. If you were lucky enough to have a pony as a child, I'm pretty sure all children have tried riding side saddle in a typical GP pony saddle, where you've popped your leg up onto the pommel and pretended that you're riding around side saddle. I definitely remember doing that quite a few times. Or you do it with friends and one of you would lead while the other one tried to sit side saddle, and then you'd make them trot and they'd literally like bounce out of the saddle, because, you know, your standard pony club GP saddle wasn't designed to be a side saddle. Supposedly, Catherine de Medici did this to show off her shapely ankle and calf. Also, riding like this allowed a lady to be in more control of her horse, which meant ladies found it easier to then trot and canter. And like I say, then they didn't need a gentleman leading them. And more adjustments were made over the centuries to the side saddle to make it easier for women to have more balance and more control in the saddle. In the 1830s, a second pommel increased women's security, allowing them to canter and jump when hunting, while still keeping their modesty. Something else that changed on the side saddle in the early 1800s was the stirrup. So women used to have their foot in a slipper stirrup, which was very beautiful and very elegant looking. However, it was actually incredibly dangerous, because if the women happened to have a fall, whether their horse tripped or spooked, or maybe they were out jumping, then quite often their foot would get caught in the stirrup and then they'd be dragged. And obviously this would then mean them having horrific injuries, probably getting caught by the horse's legs. So we see the slipper stirrup replaced with the more standard stirrup that we see to this day. Another issue with early side saddles, especially around like the Regency period, was they were only done up with one girth. Now, if a lady happened to ride a little too much to the right or a little too much to the left, they could sometimes cause the saddle to slip, and this would make them then fall under the horse, and they could obviously get kicked by their feet. Ladies' clothing also changed over time. Ladies' riding attire wasn't actually a thing till the 16th century, when a habit specifically for riding side saddle was designed. Before this, women just wore their normal day wear, which caused terrifying accidents where ladies were caught by their long, heavy skirts and dragged if they fell. In 1875 saw the first safety skirt, which was buttoned along the seams to help stop women from being dragged if they did fall. And later, the apron skirt, which was created with buttons around the waist, just covering the legs. Breeches would have to be worn underneath these. The riding habit in the 19th century was a very stylish but also functional riding outfit. The jacket, often influenced by military and men's tailoring. They would be made of a strong, sturdy fabric like wool or tweed, beautiful ornate buttons, and it would be well cut, giving a lady that perfect hourglass, flattering shape. The skirt needed to allow a lady freedom to move. An apron skirt allowed this. High-collared shirt would be worn under the jacket. The accessories would be things like gloves, a waistcoat. Women tend to wear a top hat with some sort of decoration on it. And fun fact, men rode side saddle. When I first read that, I was like, I've never seen a picture of a man riding side saddle. But grooms often had to ride side saddle because if they were training a lady's horse to go side saddle, they would have to work it that way. So yeah, grooms would jump on, ride side saddle to help train a lady's horse. They found it really embarrassing, and they'd often do it like really early in the morning or late in the evening so nobody saw them. But it makes sense, doesn't it? They've obviously got to train that horse to be perfectly behaved and to take the side saddle. So it was the groom's job to do that. In the early 19th century, it was much more sociably acceptable for women to ride astride, and by like the 1930s, many women were then riding astride, and I assume that would have then given them the chance to jump much bigger fences and be that little bit more secure when it came to jumping. I don't necessarily mean they were more secure when it came to just everyday riding, but I think if you're like out with the hunt and you're galloping across the fields and jumping big hedges, then the likelihood is you're going to probably want to ride astride for that. Though I know there are women out there who jump big hedges side saddle, and honestly they are utterly amazing when they do it. But it's, what a beautiful skill to have, to be able to ride side saddle and to be able to canter and gallop and jump. And definitely I'm thinking maybe it's something I'd like to do a little bit more of. I don't know how easy it is to do that, and as we know, side saddles are ridiculously expensive, and so many side saddles out there are really old. They're back from the Victorian period. I know I've got a client who hunts side saddle, and her side saddle I think is over 100 years old, if not more, and they do fetch a lot. I think they can fetch £3,000 or £4,000. They are not cheap things to buy, but it's such a beautiful, elegant way of riding, and it's definitely something that we don't want to lose. So I hope they continue to do lots of showing classes which are for ladies that ride side saddle, and that we still get to see people kind of galloping across the countryside side saddle, because it really is such a beautiful sight to see. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that little quick dive into the history of side saddle riding, and I will see you guys again very soon.